And good afternoon. Welcome to Babylon, Daniel's Courage in Captivity, Day 5. It's our last day of our VBS session, and today is kind of a continuation of yesterday's Bible story, where we're going to discover that God is going to save Daniel. Daniel won't be saved from the lion's den. He'll be saved in the lion's den. He'll be put there. But God will make sure that the animals don't tear him apart, that the animals won't even give him a scratch. And so all of our activities today will be zeroed in around that story and how we can rely on God and be thankful to God for what he has done to us. And our Bible verse for today comes from the book of 1 Chronicles, chapter 16, verse 34. Give thanks to the Lord, for he is good. His love is faithful and endures forever. And our Bible point is, when you're thankful, God is with you. Daniel survived that night in the lion's den. When the king showed up the next morning, afraid that something had happened to Daniel, Daniel was able to call out to the king and say that I'm perfectly fine, that my God has taken care of me. Daniel gave praise and thanks to God. And we hope one of the things that you've learned in this VBS is that we should be thankful for all that God has done for us. So we hope you enjoy this last day of Babylon, Daniel's Courage in Captivity. Thanks for watching. Hi, and welcome to day number 5 of our Babylon, Daniel's Courage in Captivity VBS. This is the last day of our VBS program, and our Bible point today is that when you're thankful, God is with you. And our scripture passage is from 1 Chronicles chapter 16, verse 34, where King David says, give thanks to the Lord, for he is good. His faithful love endures forever. And our story continues a little bit with the story we had yesterday, Daniel coming up out of the lion's den. Daniel gave credit to God, thanks to God, for God protecting him in the lion's den. But Daniel also served as a witness to King Darius. He continued to serve Darius faithfully until Darius passed from the scene. Daniel will live up until at least the first year of the next king, King Cyrus. Cyrus is the king who will allow the Jewish exiles to return back to Judah and Jerusalem. Daniel isn't going to go with them. Daniel will be a very, very old man by the time he's in the lion's den and by the time King Darius passes away and King Cyrus takes the throne. But throughout all of his life, from when he was a teenage boy and he was taken into captivity and he saw his nation fall under foreign domination, throughout his remaining teen years and his adult life, throughout Babylonian kings and Medo kings and Persian kings, Daniel has always been consistent in trusting God, in praising God, in worshiping God and only God, and in witnessing to everybody he met to tell them about God. And that's what we want you to take away from this VBS, is that God will take care of you, God loves you, and if you give your heart to Jesus, you should spend your life serving him, trusting that God will take care of you, and that you should care enough about other people that you meet, whether they're just like you, or whether maybe they're from a different culture, a different country, if they have different beliefs than you do, that you show love to them, that you respect them, but that you always consistently show God's truth and God's ways, and you point them to Jesus, and that you pray for them so that they will come to know Jesus too. We hope you've enjoyed learning about Daniel and his three friends. Our culture here in the 21st century is one that's going to require Christians to show more and more courage, more and more trust. As the culture turns away from God, we need to be like Daniel and his friends and stand tall for God. Thanks for watching. and welcome to Cool Springs for day 5 of our Babylon, Daniel's Courage in Captivity, VBS, Bible Time, Bakery and Foods. And today we're going to talk about vegetables and also all others. We've already talked about fruits. We talked about how herbs and spices were used for food and for measure and for cooking and for medicines. We talked about baked goods and we talked about how they measured things. And today we're going to look at some of the vegetables that Daniel and his friends would have eaten and some of the other things that can be made from either baked goods or from fruits and vegetables. So over here on this tray, we've got obviously some onions coming up out of the ground. We've got potatoes. They would have had that. We have tomato. You know, there's a lot of argument about which category the tomato falls into because it grows on a vine. But they would have been able to eat tomatoes, potatoes, and onions. They would have been able to eat things like parsley. We also have here some baked goods made out of flour, some slices of cake, figs or dates, I forget which. Figs would have been very abundant. This looks good. A nice baked good because they did have sugar and they had ways to make chocolate and ways to make bread so that you could have cookies and cakes and treats like that. And here on this tray, which I'm going to try to pick up without spilling anything out, we've got eggs. Let's talk a little bit about the egg because if you look in Exodus, in the account of the Passover, you'll discover that in Exodus chapter 12, they're told to eat lamb, they're told to eat bitter herbs, but they are not mentioned at all anything to drink. They were slaves, they probably had to drink water, and no egg is mentioned. But by the time we get to the New Testament era, Jesus and his disciples in the upper room would have had wine on the table, fruit of the vine, for them to drink for Passover. And coming from the Babylonian captivity down to Jesus' time, even to modern times, on Passover tables, they'll have an egg. This happens to be a brown egg, that you can use any kind of an egg. They would normally roast the egg. It's where we get our tradition of the Easter egg from. The Jews brought back the idea of adding an egg to the Passover table from their time in the Babylonian captivity. And so our Christian tradition about decorating Easter eggs, because what's inside the egg? It's the yolk that would otherwise be a chicken if we had not claimed it to use to make scrambled eggs or boiled eggs or to break and stir to use in cooking. So because the egg is round and because it contains life, it has become a symbol of Easter. We also have some foods that would have been available in the Middle East in Daniel's time and in modern times. You've got some hummus and you've got lots of different spices that can be used. A lot of times people will take bread and they'll dip it in the hummus and eat it. It's very, very common when you go to somebody's house, or even if you're in Israel today and you go to a shop, whether the shop is run by an Israeli or an Arab, part of their hospitality will be to offer all kinds of hummus and foods for you to just snack and nibble on. Daniel and his friends ate lots of nuts, they ate lots of fruits, they ate lots of vegetables, they ate foods that God approved of because they wanted to have healthy bodies, and they also wanted to make sure that they didn't eat any food, usually a meat, an animal sacrifice of some sort, that had been offered up to a pagan idol. They wanted to have their minds, their hearts, and their bodies pure and healthy for God. We hope you've enjoyed being part of our online virtual VBS. We hope you'll try some of these foods at home if you're in the local area. We're going to have a lot of this kind of food available for us in our live VBS on July 21st through the 23rd. Come and join us at Cool Springs for Babylon, Daniel's Courage in Captivity. Thanks for watching. And welcome to day number 5, the final day of our Babylon, Daniel's Courage in Captivity VBS. Today's family fun game is what we call Voice of God. Sometimes we call it Diver. What you need for this is something that can delineate the area that the game is going to be played. We use pool noodles. You could literally use anything. You could actually throw a blanket on the carport, and the edge of the blanket is the field. And then you toss all kinds of toys and objects in it. These are some beach toys that we have in our children's ministry area. You take the field, whatever length the field is, and you fill it full of all kinds of different toys. Then you take either a snorkel mask or just a blindfold, and you blindfold the person who's going to be trying to find the object. Everybody else gathers around the outside of your field, whether it's your noodles, whether it's a blanket, whatever it is you're using. That person that's about to be blindfolded gets to hear the person who's playing the voice of God. And they're told, be sure you listen out for this voice, because this is the voice of God. When the person is blindfolded, they're going to be instructed to get in the field and try to feel around to find whatever the designated object is. So it might be, for example, this watering dish. It might be a shovel or a rake. It might be a slingshot. It might be any toy that you've designated that they have some idea of what it is they're looking for. But because they're blindfolded, they have to stay on the field, and they have to use the sense of feeling, and they also have to use the sense of hearing. While the person who is the voice of God is calling out right directions to get to where the object is, everybody else is calling out bad or wrong directions. And the point of the game, of course, is for the person who is it to learn to drown out the world with its false instructions, with its trying to get people to do the wrong thing, and to learn how to focus in on listening to the voice of God. It ties into our Bible story because Daniel and his friends, from the time they were teenagers taken into captivity until they died of old age, were living in a culture that was telling them wrong things about God, telling them wrong things about what's considered to be right and moral and healthy and good. And they had to learn on a daily basis to consult the scriptures, to pray, to rely on what they had learned before they were taken into captivity as slaves, to help them focus on, I know God doesn't want me to eat this kind of food. I know God doesn't want me to worship pagan idols. I know God doesn't want me to cheat, be dishonest, all the different things that society would tell them to do. And so just by playing this game over and over, it's one of our favorites. We've done it for several VBSs, and the kids always love it, and the adults do too, because it's teaching us to learn how to listen for the still small voice of God and to try to follow God's instructions, because the world is trying to send us all kinds of other messages. So you can use simple things that you've got laying around the house or that you can borrow from neighbors and friends to create a really good, fun learning experience for your kids and maybe for their friends, is you've invited people to come with you to learn how Daniel and his friends, who were young people, were able not only to survive, but thrive in a culture, in a world that was trying to tell them that everything that they knew about God was wrong, but they were able to stay focused on God because they learned to listen to the right voice. Thanks for watching.
Okay, young people, we're in day 5 of the Vacation Bible School, and our verse is 1 Chronicles 16:34. Oh, give thanks unto the Lord, for he is good, for his mercy endures forever. Now, chapter 6 and 16 through 28 in Daniel is when Daniel got thrown into a lion's den. We're not going to do lion's den today, but you'll see that later on in Vacation Bible School. But this verse would have been a great comfort to him because God's mercy saved him out of that lion's den. As a matter of fact, the lion's mouths were shut. He just sat down, probably laid up against one of them, and went to sleep that night. But the next day when he got out of there, the bad guys that tried to get him killed with lions got thrown in there themselves. But what we want to do today is talk about the Babylonians. And they made maps. They did some navigation. And I have a map here of the world, an older map. And Babylon is right up here where Iraq is at, and Turkey right in here. And Israel's over this way, and the children of Israel got all the way up there to Babylon. And so they made maps. The other couple of other things that ancient people did was understand a little bit about magnetism. And I have a horseshoe magnet here, and I've got some utensils. And you can see that a magnet will pick up iron items. I have another magnet here, and they'll go together. And by the way, you can turn them a certain way, and they won't go together. They repel each other. Magnets, one side is the north side, and one side is called the south side. And so if you put two south sides together, you'll see that they repel each other. If you put a north-south side together, they'll go together. So opposites attract in magnetism, okay? Now, there's a magnetic field created by this. And we have an older television. It has a cathode ray tube. There's a big picture tube in there. And that cathode ray tube shoots electrons through filters that makes the color of the TV. Well, electrons are affected by magnetism. And so we can show the magnetic field by making the electrons that are hitting the back of the screen follow the magnetic field. So here we go. This is a horseshoe magnet. We'll do it first. And this, you'll see the magnetic field beginning to come to show because electrons are following the magnetic field in the back of the television. Now, if you've got one of these televisions that are like this, you probably don't want to do that at home if you're still using it because it kind of messes it up after a while, okay? So anyway, there's the horseshoe magnetic field. Then, you see what happens after it's over. Then I have a circular magnet here. It has a little different magnetic field, as you can see, okay? And we turn it on its end, it creates different. So one of the things that ancient people did for navigation was take a small piece of metal.
I have a question.
Take a small piece of metal, and they would take I have a pin here, and you can take that pin, and if you strike it with the magnet in the same direction, you get all of the electrons in there lined up in the same direction, and that thing will point to the north if you suspend it somehow. One of the ways you can suspend it is drop it in water. I've not had success with this pin, but we'll see if it'll work. And you put it in water and let it float, and it eventually, and that one's not going to float, but that's what they would make a piece of metal real thin and lay it in the water, and it would point to north, okay?
He had a question.
What's your question?
What happens if you put instead refrigerator magnets on that?
Same thing. You get a pattern, okay? So this.
But again, he doesn't want you to do that with a TV that you're actually still using at home because it can mess up the TV.
And it won't work on the newer televisions. I don't know what it might do to one of them, but that shows the magnetic field. This is actually coming out of the magnet all the time, and that's a way to see what happens with the magnetic field. And again, magnetism was an early way to use navigation because a magnetized piece of metal points north. Okay? And if you know which way north is, then you can navigate. And if you want to know where north is at, get up early and watch the sun come up. It always comes up in the east. So if the sun is coming up to the east, that means that way is east. And then this way, opposite is west. North would be here now if I'm facing west, north that way, and south that way. And they learned that, and they begin to know how to navigate. Of course, today we have some very fancy navigation things like GPS and etc. Have a great Vacation Bible School. That's it.
And good afternoon. Welcome to day number 5 of our Babylon VBS, Daniel's Courage in Captivity. As we are preparing these podcasts, we had something happen at church just the other day. Today is Wednesday. It happened on Sunday that we discovered that somehow a chipmunk has gotten into our church facility, and we had some men going all through the church trying to capture the animal, and they finally captured it, and they had it in a plastic bag, and they were going to take it out the back door and just release it. There is a field back behind our church. We're in kind of a rural area that's rapidly turning into subdivisions, and they were just going to release it humanely. But one of the men accidentally didn't have the bag secured properly, and the chipmunk got out, and he's still on the loose. We actually have a trap that you can't see down this hallway, which was the last known location of Mr. Chipmunk, where we're hopefully going to be able to capture him and then humanely release him. So our animals feature in VBS isn't going to include chipmunks. I don't really know if chipmunks were part of the ecosystem of ancient Babylon. But today it does include the lion, and my friend Josh here has stuffed lion that we have nicknamed Dread because of the lion's mane. Looks kind of like dreadlocks to us. Lions were in Babylon. The Babylonians imported them. The kings used them for entertainment and also as instruments of torture. Today's Bible story, and the reason we've chosen the lion to be animal for day number 5 of our VBS, is because today's Bible story is out of Daniel chapter 6, where Daniel was a very old man now. He was in his 80s at least, maybe his early 90s. And the king at the time, who was a Medo-Persian king, the Medo-Persians had conquered the Babylonians, is in charge, and he had observed Daniel's work habits, and he had promoted him to be the top guy in the country, which made some of the other employees and advisors very, very jealous. And so they were looking for a way to falsely accuse Daniel. But they knew Daniel's character, that he wasn't going to take bribes, he wasn't going to mistreat people, nothing that they could really accuse him of that would stick. And it finally occurred to them that there was one way that they could trap Daniel and get rid of him, if it had something to do with his faith in God. So they went to the Medo-Persian king, Darius, and they flattered him and tricked him into signing an order saying that for 30 days, nobody would be allowed to pray to any god except to the king himself. Well, Daniel can't do that, because when it comes to a conflict between what the government says and what God says, we must always put God first, and Daniel did. And when it was reported to the king, Daniel disobeyed the law, he prayed to his God, Darius immediately knew, uh-oh, it's my fault, I've been tricked. And he looked for a way to get Daniel out of it, but he wasn't able to. And so ultimately, at the end of the day, he had to have Daniel tossed into the lion's den, where there were many, many lions. Lions that had been deprived of food on purpose, so that anybody that the king wanted to have executed would be tossed into the lion's den, and the lions would pounce on them. Lions can hurt you with their mouths because they have powerful jaws, but they can also hurt you with the claws that they have inside their paws, because they're part of the cat family. Everybody assumed Daniel is going to die in the lion's den. But God sent one of his angels to seal up the lions' mouths, and also to make the lions tame, because remember, the mouth isn't the only way that they can hurt Daniel. They've got paws that have claws, and they could have scratched him very badly and hurt him that way, but they didn't. They were very docile and domestic. God is in charge of all of his creation. God created the lions. He created the sheep. He created the birds, the fish. Yes, the chipmunks, the gnats, the flies. God created everybody and everything. And so in our VBS this week, when we're talking about the animals that were in Babylon, the people who were living there, whether they were Babylonians or whether they were Jewish exiles who had been forced to go to Babylon, they had to learn to live in that society and deal with the animals and the wildlife that was there. And they had to learn first and foremost to put God number one. Daniel did, and God preserved him. So we hope you've enjoyed looking at the animals of ancient Babylon in our VBS this week. Thanks for watching.
Welcome to day 5 of crafts. We're going to be making a bologna lion as we're learning about Daniel being put into the lion's den and God saving him. To start, you'll get your bologna and put it on a plate. We used Ritz crackers for the ears and radishes as little cutouts to put on top of the Ritz to make it look like ears. I used carrots, and my son used Cheese Whiz and cheese puffs for around the outside of the lion for the fur. And then we had little candy eyes. We mixed black food coloring with mustard to make the whiskers and details. This is day 5 of crafts for Babylon VBS, Daniel's Courage in Captivity. So we're doing the lion's den, and this is just another craft that you could do instead of the bologna lion. So to start off, we're gonna take out all of our stickers. I'm going to keep the backs on for now. Okay. And then you just take out that little stone. We're going to place our lions on our stone. So put this guy down here. And this one came with instructions, so if you need to refer to that, that would be nice to have to see where you want to place everything. Just place your lions wherever you see fit, and you can place your bones as you do the lions. And I have Daniel right there. So I'm just gonna place the bones down here. Okay, now to put Daniel together, he doesn't have a sticky back, but you're going to use the little circles that came with the kit. And you're going to put your string on the back of Daniel. Do it that way. And I just think it should go down further, so probably down at the bottom of Daniel's, because I'm going to be sticking it to the back. So I'm going to stick that part of the rope to the back with your little circle sticker. Okay, and then you got Daniel, and to secure him, I'll take the other circle sticker, take the back off of it, and I'll just place that on the back. just to keep him secure on the rope. There you go. And then you put your little stone back in. And this way Daniel can be lifted out of the lion's den. Or you can put him back in. And it says, so the king gave the order, and they brought Daniel and threw him into the lion's den. The king said to Daniel, may your God, whom you serve continually, rescue you. Daniel 6:16. And he sure did rescue Daniel. Thank you. We hope that you had a great time at VBS.